The best way I can describe it is it's like having your own personal marching band that's following you around all the time, but instead of playing instruments, they're just repeating all the, awkward or embarrassing things that you say or do all the time and just telling you, the reasons that people shouldn't want to be your friend. My name is Kati Davis, and I've been coming to Willowdale for about 2 years. I was born into a Christian family, grew up in the church, so I had a relationship with Jesus from a very young age. I actually remember kneeling down by my bedside and praying the prayer, and I remember thinking I had to kneel because that's, what all the precious moments figurines did. So yeah, that moment is very vivid. I had this understanding that he was my friend. I actually used to talk to him out loud on the school bus when the one girl that I sat next to, who I was friends with, would get off and I felt lonely. So I'd just start talking to him, or I would pretend to push him on the swing set on the playground, which, it sounds cute in theory, but in hindsight probably just looks like a scene out of a horror movie. But yeah, so I just understood that, my relationship with God was personal from a young age. Anxiety is something that I've pretty much always struggled with, even as a kid. And so it just has manifested in different ways. It has affected my relationships with people. I just find myself, tending to overthink conversations or texts. If someone doesn't reply to me for a while, my first thought isn't, oh, this person is probably busy, they'll get back to me. When they can, it's what did I do wrong? Or, oh, this person must, not want to be my friend anymore. In middle school, I had gone to a small Christian school. Pretty much everyone there knew me. I knew everyone. And, I had struggles with friendships like most middle schoolers do. And so when I transitioned to high school, I started going to a public school for the first time. And I was actually really excited for that change because, I saw it as an opportunity to make new friends and kind of reinvent myself. But I have a history of big changes or transitions tend to be a trigger for me with my anxiety. And this was probably the biggest change that I'd ever had until that point. Pretty much I was so anxious about, just wanting to make new friends to the point that it just consumed me and made it hard just to have any conversation. I made very few friends that year, and I ended up just spiraling into a depression that lasted for the rest of that year and really just lost all sense of who I was. I'd always kind of had a reputation as someone who was really happy and got along with everyone, and that just wasn't who I felt like anymore. And eventually just reached a point in college where I started to understand that at the root of that anxiety was just this fear of not being loved by people. And so pretty much just lived in constant fear that at some point the people in my life were just going to realize that I was not good enough for them and were going to leave me. And so I was just living out of that fear all the time. So being rooted in truth is a very huge thing that I'm learning to do. There was a verse that I came across while I was in college. I was just reading 1 John 4 for a devotional that I had on a retreat. And I'm sure I'd read this verse before in my life, but it just really hit me in a new way. So the verse is 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. Therefore, the one who fears has not been made perfect in love. And so the first time I read it, when I was very much in the thick of, struggling with that anxiety and with, my relationships, that verse was really comforting because it was oh my gosh, I don't have to be afraid of not being loved by people because God's love for me is enough and I can rest in that. And that's absolutely true. But as I have gotten older and really come to understand more of the context of that verse, I've realized that really what it's saying is that because of God's love for me, I don't have to be afraid of him. when I was 24 and was just really like struggling with where I was at in life, I remember I felt like I was letting God down, like that I had disappointed him. You know, I read that verse, there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. It's just this reminder that, you know, God showed his love for me on the cross through Jesus. And so all of the mistakes that I make, or, you know, the ways that I sin, or, you know, even just the things that I'm disappointed in myself, God doesn't hold those things against me. When I was struggling with anxiety, I very much found my identity in like the things that I was insecure about. So, you know, whether that was my anxiety itself or my body image, my income level, things that I had done in my past, like hurtful words that I had spoken to people. There was a point in college where I was really trying to cope with anxiety in some pretty unhealthy ways involving alcohol. And so there was a lot of, you know, shame and regret with that. But as I root my sense of identity in who God says that I am, that's permanent. And so the things that he tells me about myself are permanent. And that's, you know, why I can root myself in them, because they're not going to change. On the days when, you know, I'm struggling with being single, I can remember that he calls me his bride. Or on the days when I'm struggling with just feeling like, you know, unlovable, I can remember that he calls me beloved. Or I'm lonely, I remember that he calls me his friend. And so it just all goes back to this beautiful friendship that he offers to me.